Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Realtor Talks with me, Lloyd Cox. Thanks for joining me today. I have Ryan Dixon from luxuryproperty.com, one of my colleagues here on the podcast today. Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Thank you for having me, Lloyd. Good to be here.
Okay, just so everyone can understand who you are and who you are as a guest on the show, can you just give a brief introduction about yourself, Ryan, where you're from and when you moved to Dubai?
Sure. So, my name's Ryan Dixon. As Lloyd says, I'm one of the private client advisors here at luxuryproperty.com. As you can probably tell by my accent, I am British. So I'm from just outside of Reading. So that's west of London for those people that aren't familiar with the UK. But actually grew up in Germany. So spent a lot of my childhood in Munich, in Germany. Was actually born there and lived there for 10 years. And then I think my parents seemed to have the expat bug at that point. So we actually moved to Saudi for a couple of years when I was younger, back to Germany, and then over to England when I was about 13. Clearly the expat bug has rubbed off on me and now my wife as well, given that we're obviously in Dubai. So we moved over to Dubai coming up to 3.5 years ago now, from the UK. So moved over. We always wanted to do the expat thing as adults. We'd both done it as kids, but wanted to do it as adults. And after a lot of years of talking about it, we finally pulled our fingers out and made the move back in 2016. We actually landed on Christmas Eve 2016, which was an interesting time to land in a hot, non-typically Christmas country.
Okay, well that's really interesting. So you're kind of, you're both third culture kids, I would say then, if you've grown up in multiple different countries. And then obviously your daughter's obviously going to be a similar breed as you guys.
I think expat brat is probably what she'll be, if we're not already.
Yeah, I think that depends on how you raise them, rather than where
definitely an expat brat.
Do you think that kind of rubbed off on you living in, say, in Germany or growing up there or in Saudi? Because you don't seem that kind of typical expat brat type. Knowing you, right?
No. I mean, I think it's like you say, it's one of those things where I don't think there's such a thing as an expat brat. It's all about kind of how the parents bring you up. I think what Expat Life did for me, and I guess it's relevant talking about it in a podcast in Dubai with two British guys. I think what it did for me is and my sister actually as well, who lived in Dubai for a period of time, is it kind of made us fairly well-rounded, because we were so used to dealing with other cultures. We were so used to different nationalities. We both went to an international school in Germany. We were in the English section, but we were surrounded by the Spanish section, the Scandinavian section, Italian section. So you got lots of different understanding of different cultures and their approach to things. Obviously, all of our teachers were international as well. So I think what that did is it rubbed off on us in a positive light in terms of we feel that we are relatively well-rounded. And it was actually really interesting going back at the age of 13 and 11, going back to the UK, back to a UK schooling system. And as you know, Lloyd, UK schooling system can be quite brutal at times, just in terms of culture. So it was really interesting going from an international, I always saw it as quite a happy, lovey-dovey culture, to I went to an all-boys school in the UK. Going back to an all-boys school as a 13-year-old kid coming from Germany, you can imagine the kind of abuse that I got at times. But the good thing about it, and if any kids are listening to this that are expats, make sure you play a sport or do something that you're good at, because as soon as they realize that I can play a bit of football, and Lloyd, you'll probably argue on whether I can play football or not, but that's another podcast. As soon as they realize I can play football, I was accepted. So find your niche and stick with that, because it really does help.
Yeah, because well, that's what I was going to ask you actually, mentioning that, because sometimes I think it might be a bit difficult to fit in. If you, it's all great having the well-rounded experience, and I think that's something that all kids need. And definitely going and living in a different country, I find people who have that experience in their childhood are definitely much more well-rounded and have a much different experience in the time that they're growing up and the time that you really develop as a person, than other people who have kind of just stuck in their one place. But also there's the flip side to that of not really being able to fit into a certain place. So I'll just give you like my perspective on it. I'm like, my dad is British, my mom is Filipino. So I don't really like fit in either one. I'm not like full British. So I'm not British enough to be a British guy, but I'm also not Filipino enough to be one of the Filipino guys. So like you're kind of caught in the middle, and sometimes you don't necessarily fit in fully with one group. It's great to have that knowledge of two completely different cultures, but then you also don't fit in. Did you find that at all when you first moved, or did you adapt really easily?
No, I did find it, and I think I still find it now. In terms of like, where am I from? Like, where is home? And I think one of the things that I kind of envy on other people is they have like their roots set. So they've got like their home mates that they went to kindergarten with, they grew up through primary education, secondary education. They kind of stuck together through university as well, if they did go to university. And they've got that real, I've got great friends, don't get me wrong, but they've got like, it's almost family at that point. And because we moved around a fair bit as kids, we didn't necessarily, or we don't necessarily have that kind of proper grounding. Having said that, on the flip side, you just have more friends in different places. But I think, yeah, to your point, like what you miss out on to a certain extent is having that home, that solid home. So when people ask me, where are you from? The simple answer, if I don't really want to talk too much, is Wokingham, just outside of Reading.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I get into the detail, then it's actually quite a complicated answer.
Definitely. I think we could even do a completely separate podcast on it if we
100%.
really went in depth, right?
Yeah.
We won't do that today, maybe on another one.
Yeah.
Going back to say you were moving to Dubai on Christmas Eve. Why did you guys choose Dubai in the first place? Knowing that you've been to multiple different countries, out of all the cities in the world, why did you choose Dubai?
Couple of reasons, really. So my sister, as I mentioned before, she's lived out here for a period of time. She's actually just moved away now. But she was out here, so she moved out here about 2 years before us. So we obviously got an understanding from her as to what it was like, not just as a city that you see as a tourist, but as somewhere that you can actually live properly and understanding. I think Dubai often gets a bit of a negative perception of being glitzy and glam and just about fine restaurants and fancy cars. But I think when you know somebody that's lived here, and you know someone as closely as I know my sister that's lived here, you get more of an understanding of what it's really like, what the expat culture is really like. And that really appealed. So we came on holiday to see what it was like. And we made a decision at that point to actually think about moving here. There were other options, so Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia is always on the cards for most Brits, but for us that was a bit too far away. So I think the thing that really attracted to us about Dubai is how close it is to the UK relatively. So it's a 7-hour flight, and it's not too expensive. And I think one of the important factors as well is just the ease of access to it in terms of the language mainly. I can't speak any Arabic. I know you can speak a bit of Arabic, but even though I can't speak any Arabic, which is terrible having been here 3.5 years, but it's quite easy to access. It's quite easy to do work over here in, I guess, the first non-official language being English. So that was a real draw to us for Dubai as a location.
Okay, great. And so, well, I personally know that when you moved over here, you weren't working in real estate. you're in a previous career. What made you move from that career, and maybe explain to anyone who's listening what you did previously and transition into real estate?
Sure. Yeah. So I was and I have been all through my career a marketer. So I actually did marketing at university, or I always knew that I wanted to get into marketing. I think going back to childhood, it was advertising that really appealed to me. I'm a relatively creative person, so the creative side of it really appealed to me. So I did marketing at university, and then coming out of university with that degree, actually went into marketing from a career perspective back in 2007, a long time ago now, and worked for corporates, so relatively big corporates, always doing business to consumer marketing. I did a bit of business to business marketing, but found that quite dull actually. So yeah, worked for the likes of Merlin Entertainments, so big theme park brand or big attraction brand. I specifically worked for Thorpe Park. Also worked for a marketing agency working with BMW and Mini, obviously two great automotive brands, which was fantastic. Worked in a couple of startups as well as places like Nando's, which was a fantastic experience from me. I think I worked there for 3 years, and one of the perks that we got at Nando's was that you got a free meal every day that you worked. So I probably had about 1,200 Nando's in my lifetime, which is a fair few. But yeah, always worked in marketing. Came over here and obviously we actually came over on my wife's job. She works for KFC, interestingly enough, so we were the chicken couple back in the day. And decided to obviously stick with marketing there. It made sense to come over and continue doing what I was doing previously in the UK. So worked for a couple of companies over here, including the likes of Virgin Mobile and The Entertainer. And I guess the career change had been bubbling away for me for a period of time. I liked marketing, but I was, being brutally honest, I was starting to fall out of love with marketing. And I think that really came to a head over here for various reasons that I'm not going to go into on this kind of podcast, but it was just a different sort of approach to marketing, and in my opinion, a different quality of marketing. And I basically just wasn't enjoying it anymore. So it was actually just before our daughter was born, we kind of sat down and had the conversation about a career change and whether it made sense to do it now. If not, when did it make sense to do? And ultimately, what was I going to get involved in? There was a couple of things. One was setting up my own e-commerce business, because part of my marketing experience was working in e-commerce, especially towards the last kind of 4 or 5 years of my career in marketing. But then obviously property was another one. And I think property for me was always an interest. And I think I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking about where does that interest really stem from? And I think I came to the point where it was actually walking around town centres in the UK with my dad, because he'd always go to the property windows, the estate agents' windows, and look at properties. I never understood it at the time. I never understood why we had a house, but he'd look at property. But slowly over the years, I kind of got an understanding of why property was of interest. And yeah, I just developed an interest in property from there. Love brand designs, love the likes of location. Sarah Beanie was one of my weirdly childhood heroes. For those people that don't know Sarah Beanie, she was probably the queen of property shows in the UK when I was growing up. So it all really started from there. I'm sorry if you can hear my baby screaming in the background. Yeah, so it all started from there really. And then when we made the decision, or when I made the decision to take a career change, and property was the direction that I wanted to go in, it was a risk, to be honest. But it was a risk that I was willing to take and I wanted to explore. So to get involved in it, I was actually speaking to a friend of mine, and I was speaking to him about potentially going into property. And he mentioned this guy on YouTube. Wasn't you, unfortunately, Lloyd. It was Andrew, the owner of, or one of the owners of luxuryproperty.com. And he said, oh, this guy on YouTube that I follow, he's a funny guy. And yeah, he just does real estate with a difference. And he kind of does it in the luxury end of the market. So I started watching him on YouTube, really liked his personality, really liked his approach, and ultimately liked the properties that he was presenting. So started following him on Instagram. So a very social introduction into him. And I just thought, you know what have I got to lose? Let's reach out to him and see whether he's up for having a catch up. And my pitch genuinely to him, and I'm sure he can get a screenshot of the direct message on Instagram. My pitch genuinely to him was, I have no sales experience. I have no real estate experience. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me about a sales job in real estate? And I think that is my approach a lot of the time, is just to be completely honest. I was lucky enough that resonated with Andrew. And yeah, we had that meeting, and it went from there. I got into luxury real estate.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Are you no? Obviously, it's a risk to move and change career. I've had that same path as well, as you well know, Ryan. Are you a quite risk averse person? Was this a complete change for you in terms of what you'd been traditionally into, or are you someone who does take risks on a regular basis, or was it like a massive life-changing thing for you?
I mean, I guess in terms of my risk adversity, I'm more of a risk taker. It's obviously a spectrum. I'm more on the riskier side than the non-risky side. So yeah, I guess that helped the situation. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, ultimately, I don't take stupid risks. I'm fairly process driven, and I'm fairly calculated in the decisions that we make as a family, because it was an important family decision, not just a me and a career decision for me. It was ultimately a family decision. So it was important for me to go through that detail and make sure that it was a decision that could be sustained first and foremost, let's be honest, from a financial perspective. And I think for me as well, what made it more comfortable for us as a family to go through with that decision was having a bit of a plan to it. So it wasn't just a case of, oh, I'm fed up of marketing, I'm going to go into real estate. It was, okay, is this the right point to leave marketing? Why is it the right point to leave marketing? And when I go into real estate, what's my plan? And for me, without going too much into the plan, but for me, there was a couple of key milestones that I set myself. It was a 6-month and a 12-month. And it was a clear view of what I wanted to achieve by 6 months, and which I've now passed in terms of the timing, and what I want to achieve within 12 months. And I think why that was important for me, and I'd advise this to anybody getting into any career change, but especially real estate, was there's times where it's going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. Whatever career change you make, there's times where you're going to look at it and go, why have I made this decision? Why didn't I just stick to the thing that I'm qualified in and I've got 15 years of experience in? Because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of challenges. There's lots of things that I disagree with in terms of approach. There's a lot of things that frustrate me. And I think if I didn't have that plan and ultimately those 2 milestones in place, there would have been several occasions where I'd have thought, you know what, this isn't for me, I'm out. But by having that, especially the 6-month one, by having that milestone in place, it kept me on the track of going, do you know what, yes, I've had a rubbish day or a rubbish week, or I haven't understood something, or I've been frustrated by something, but here's my view, here's my plan, stick out with that plan. And in sales especially, I think there's ups and downs all the time. It's a bit of a roller coaster, so you've got to have a plan to make sure that you can, ride that roller coaster.
Yeah, well, that kind of really leads me on to how, like you're speaking about how you're finding it, the ups and downs. How has it been in these first 6 months, and has anything really surprised you that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, it's been really good. Like overall, it's been really good. And like I just alluded to there, yes, it's been challenging at times. It's very different to the world that I've been used to in marketing and the corporate world. There's a lot to learn. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of information to learn, a lot of new processes to learn, a lot of new approaches to kind of get used to. Not only from a how to conduct yourself, but simple things like I was a marketer, I was a digital marketer. I wore shorts and t-shirts into the office when I was at Nando's. I wore jeans when I was at O2. So simple things like getting used to having to wear a suit again and a shirt again. I genuinely, just before I started my career in real estate, I had to go back to my dad's house and pick up a load of ties because he'd luckily just retired. So little things like that, you've just got to get used to. So it has been a challenge, but overall I've really enjoyed it, and I'm the kind of person that I like to learn, and I think that's a really important thing for anybody, is that you've got to continuously develop yourself in your field and other fields as well, and I like to give myself those challenges to learn new things. So from that perspective, it's been fantastic. In terms of things that have surprised me, yeah, there have been things that have surprised me. I think probably one of the main things that surprised me is, and this might resonate with you, Lloyd, having come from a non-real estate background as well. But if I think back to my marketing career, I obviously worked in teams and managed teams. And so the focus on teamwork was so important to getting your job done and getting results done. And I think, being really brutal, one of the things that I've been really interested and surprised about in real estate is that teamwork does exist. And I think, Lloyd, we obviously work in the same Arabian Ranches team at the moment, and it's working really well. But if you go a layer below that, and one of the things I found quite surprising is that actually the dynamic of teams in real estate generally is very different, because actually, if you think about it, sometimes your biggest competitor is actually your teammate, because you're working for the same company, looking at the same leads, in the same communities. So that's been a real interesting, I guess, psychological challenge for me, is like, okay, first off, understanding that, realizing that, and then understanding how to adapt to that, so that you still make it an environment like I think we've got in the Arabian Ranches team right now, where you can work as a team, but there is that element of competitiveness. So that for me has been an eye-opener, and I guess a surprise. And then I think the other one that's been surprising on a really positive front, and hopefully this helps other people if they're thinking about making career changes, is I've been really surprised at, so I've got 6 months of real estate experience, 6 months of sales experience. And I was always very conscious at the beginning that was something that I was anxious of. And I was worried that people were going to see through that. And I was worried that people were going to ask about that. And I didn't know how to answer it. I'm a very transparent and honest person. And I think that's one of my approaches to my positioning as a real estate agent, is I want to be, I think you're very similar. You want to be a trusted advisor, and you want to be honest and open and transparent with your clients. So given my lack of real estate experience, I wanted to be open and honest with people. But what's been really surprising is that people really don't care. And I think that comes from, when I say they don't care, they don't ask about it, and they don't assume or think that I haven't got plenty of experience. And I think that comes from a couple of things, obviously. It comes from, one, as long as you're providing good, honest, knowledgeable advice, then actually there's no need for people to ask that question, because you're adding value to the experience that they're going through. And I think that's the key thing, is that my anxiety on that I haven't got much real estate experience was completely got over by the fact that actually, as long as you know your stuff, and as long as you can talk confidently to your clients about that and add value to their experience, it's not an issue. and you get through.
I agree completely, and that's definitely something I was also wary of, because in other fields you'll be essentially starting from the bottom, and you were talking about having years and years of experience in marketing. You wouldn't just jump into a higher marketing role that easily without having that kind of experience. Here in the real estate industry, as long as you learn your stuff, and that does there is an incubation period for that. You're not going to learn that stuff in the first day. But as long as you keep learning, and the industry moves so fast, the market is always changing. So as long as you're up to date, if you have that knowledge, you're ahead of someone, even if they might have 15 years experience. If they haven't been keeping up to date with the latest changes in mortgage rates, in what new project has been released in the last month, then you're already jumping ahead of them, despite having much less experience than them in terms of overall years. I think
Definitely.
I think in terms of knowledge, that works. In terms of maybe sales techniques, that is something that still takes a bit more time. And I'm also still learning that, despite having a bit of a background in sales beforehand. But it's a completely different thing. But knowledge, 100%, you can overtake someone's experience just by learning your stuff and staying dedicated to the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think knowledge, without sounding cheesy, but knowledge is definitely power in real estate. And I think that's one of the other things that surprised me, is that by doing some of the basics right, or what we Lloyd consider the basics right, and part of that is just understanding your product, understanding the market. By doing those basics right, you cut through so much competition, because you'll be amazed at how many people don't do those basics right. Which is great for us, because it cuts through some of the competition brutally, but that's what it's about, really.
Yeah. So you were talking before, obviously, and we're talking right now about learning and all the new things that you've had to do. But have you been able to transfer any of your marketing background and bring it into your own real estate business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think whatever industry you're from previously, if you are making a career change, I think the important thing, and this is one of the things that I did when I was kind of looking at getting into real estate and kind of making the decision and coming up with that plan, was, okay, what transferable skills can I kind of take from my marketing background? But not only my marketing background, I guess the corporate background that I was involved in. Yes, I was in the marketing department, but I was obviously working with a corporate structure. I was working with finance teams, I was working with HR teams. So bringing transferable skills from, yes, marketing as a specific, but the corporate side as well, was really important to me. I think the things that I brought across, or the couple of key things that I brought across, one, and I think this is the biggest thing for me so far, is listening. I think good marketers and good marketing campaigns are based on insights, and that insight comes from listening to your target audience and listening to your customer. I think any brand company that doesn't listen to their customer when they're developing products, putting marketing campaigns out there, they really struggle, and they just don't resonate with their audience. And that all comes from listening to your customer. There's obviously lots of different ways of listening to your customer. It doesn't need to be literally sitting there and listening to them talk, although that is very important. But it comes from market insights, so looking at data, looking at what trends are out there, and then based on that understanding of your customer by listening to them, is delivering messaging off the back of that makes sense to them. Because I think if you don't do that, ultimately what you end up doing is you end up delivering messaging or speaking, and you're really not hitting the nail on the head for that customer. And the quality of your conversation will be really affected by that, because ultimately they don't want to listen to you, because you're not speaking about things that make sense and resonate with those guys. So listening is definitely one of the things that I brought across. And I think adding to that, one of the things in marketing is ultimately a very psychological skill set, I guess. And actually one of the things that, if I'd have stayed in marketing, that I was always looking at doing some sort of education in psychology, because it is so important to marketing. But this understanding the psychology of a customer is really important. So what motivates people? So we deal with customers on a regular basis, and obviously by asking them questions and allowing them to talk and listening to them, you can understand what, from a psychological point of view, I really struggle to say that word, by the way, as you can tell, from a psychological point of view, what are going to be the hot buttons that you can press that mean that your conversation adds value to them. So yeah, I think those two things, listening and the psychology behind messaging and delivering messaging, are the two key things that I brought across from marketing into real estate.
Okay, yeah, well, that's definitely really interesting, and I don't think that the marketing on by agents and by developers is really great here in Dubai. Do you agree with me on that? Like, what do you think developers or individual agents marketing themselves could do better here in Dubai? Because what I see is just people putting up a sponsored advert on Instagram, just a picture, or whacking up a billboard on Sheikh Zayed Road. I don't see how it really adds value to people, like you say, or listening to what they need. What do you think people are really doing wrong?
I think one of the key challenges, and this isn't just in real estate, it's everywhere, and being blunt, it's especially in this region. One of the tendencies is you've got a load of information about your products, and you know that information inside out. One of the tendencies is to just go there and just dump it on people and hope that something sticks. That really doesn't work, because it's overwhelming for the customer to take all that information in, and ultimately they end up taking away nothing. So I think one of the key things that people can do, developers and agents can do differently over here, is think about when and where to deliver messaging and how to stagger it. And I guess going back to my marketing world, how to deliver an overall campaign instead of just a one-off burst. Because actually, by delivering an overall campaign and staggering the messaging and delivering different parts of the product's benefits at different times, that's going to help the customer understand what your product is a lot better than if you just do that kind of verbal diarrhea. Here you go, here's everything, go away and kind of sift through that yourself. So yeah, I think that's one of the key things. I think the other key thing, and I guess coming from a marketing background, this is super important, is honesty. Honesty and transparency are so key. I think from a marketing point of view, especially in the UK, we were governed by the Advertising Standards Authority. So I come from a background where I wasn't allowed to not tell the truth on marketing campaigns, because if I did, the Advertising Standards Authority would come over to me or our company, our agency, and say, what you said there, there's no backing for that, and it's bending the truth, or it's not true. And yeah, so you had to tell the truth and think of creative ways of making sure that truth resonated with your customer base. And I think that's one thing that developers and agents can do better here, is that ultimately taking an honest and transparent approach is going to benefit you in the long run, because pulling the wool over people's eyes, people are going to find out about that. So yeah, you might get a couple of sales in the short term, but what do you want to build? Do you want to build a couple of sales in the short term, or do you want to build a reputation in the medium and long term that is, this advisor or this agent is trusted, and I'll do business with him and I'll recommend him or her to other people that hopefully will do business with him? For me, it's the latter. And I think that comes from being transparent, being honest, and to your point, Lloyd, adding value to customers you're speaking to.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely, completely agree with you, Ryan. And yeah, there's a long way to go on that, I think, here. Whether it be individual agents putting up listings on places like Property Finder, or developers just not throwing all that information, or diluting their message maybe by giving that information to agents who then throw out all that information rather than having a proper campaign. But I think that will just over time, and developers will learn how to do that properly. things.
Yeah, and I think it's the responsibility of agents as well, because there's no doubt, and it's always going to be a tricky one. I think if I was working in a developer's team, yeah, you want to make sure that you're armoring the agents that are ultimately selling your product with all of the information. So you want to give them that information up front. But I think where developers can perhaps do a bit more, and I haven't seen it so far, but obviously I'm only 6 months into my career in real estate, so it might exist. But I think, yes, give agents and brokerage companies the information up front, but then perhaps suggest tactics with that information, suggest campaigns with that information, suggest ways in which a bit of a strategy, a bit of a comms strategy on how an agent should deliver the messaging with all of the information they've got. I think at the moment what developers do is they go, here's everything, and then they step away.
Yeah.
Whereas actually I think where they really benefit is, here's everything, here's our suggestion for campaigns that have worked based on X, Y, and Z, backing that up with data. And here's an approach that we think makes sense with you. And then I think that's where, between the developer and the brokerage or the agents within that brokerage, that's where you build up a bit of a collaboration. You start to set up a bit of a team where actually working together on delivering campaigns that benefits you as an agent, because ultimately you're selling that product, and the developer because they're getting through their stock in a better way.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe what's traditionally happened is that they do that and it's been successful because projects have sold out and it's been quick. So there's no time to go through a layered campaign. It's just like, get it out there, boom, everything is sold quickly, and then I'll move on to the next one. It's more transactional than relationship building. But I think as the market matures, it will have to move further towards that model.
Yeah, and there's never a hard and fast way of doing it. And I go back to the marketing experience that I've got. There was never a, well, only this way makes sense. There's times absolutely when it's just transactional and you just need to get the information out there as quickly as possible. Having said that, you can still be targeted. You can still kind of drip campaigns through. It doesn't need to be over a 6-month period. It can be over a 3-day period. But yeah, it's not saying that there's a hard and fast rule for everything. It's each campaign, it's each it's each product on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks for that, Ryan. I'm gonna completely change tack and maybe go a bit back to what we were speaking about previously. And I do a top 5 with all the people who come on the podcast. We were speaking before about moving into the real estate industry. Can you give anyone who's looking to move from another industry into the real estate world some top 5 tips that you'd recommend for preparation or realization before moving into the industry?
Yeah, definitely. I like this. I love a good top 5. So, I mean, for me, the 5 that I've kind of come up with is, and these are obviously very relevant to me. First on, take the leap. There's 100% no such thing as the perfect time to take that leap into real estate and changing careers. For me, sorry, my daughter's just spilled water all over the table. So for me, talking about my daughter, I made that decision 3 weeks before she was born. Is that the perfect time? Absolutely not. But you've just got to make those decisions. I've come into real estate in a market that is a bit nuts at the moment with everything going on. I won't mention the C word, but it is a bit nuts. So you can't predict those things. So if you're worried about finding the perfect time, then it's going to be really, really tough. So just take the leap is my first one. Second one I'd say is choose the brokerage that you want to work for wisely. And I think for me, what that means is based on your values and how you want to position yourself in the market, make a decision on your brokerage based on that. So for me personally, I wanted to position myself more in the higher end of the real estate market. And I wanted to work for a brokerage that was, being blunt, less of a boiler room. And I think some of the bigger brokerage companies over here, they've got a bit more of a, and it works for them, by the way, so this isn't a criticism at all, but they've got a bit more of a Wolf of Wall Street approach. They've got a bit more of a boiler room approach. That, for me, with the background that I've come from and the type of person I am, I knew wouldn't have worked. So for me, it was about choosing a company that didn't do that, and ultimately position myself as a luxury broker. So that's why I ultimately chose luxuryproperty.com. So that would be my second. Third would be find your mentors, and mentors plural on purpose, because yes, it's great to have one good mentor, but for me, I think at the moment especially, it's about having multiple mentors that I can lean on, because I'm learning the industry and I'm learning processes and I'm learning how to do things. We spoke about it before, cheesy comment coming up, but knowledge is power, and you get that knowledge from other people. I didn't know anything about Dubai real estate previously, realistically, but actually surrounding myself with people that do and having them as mentors, yourself included, Lloyd, Liam, Jeffrey as an example, Andrew Cummings, Jason Haynes, Danny, who you know well as well, Lloyd. Like these guys, Richard, from a rentals perspective, these guys have been in the industry for a lot longer than I have, and really know what they're doing. And they've made the mistakes previously that I will undoubtedly make. So it's really important to surround yourself by those people, because you'll learn a lot from them and they'll help you on the way. Okay. So that's 3. How many more? 2 more, right?
2 more, yeah.
I'll be quick on these ones because I know I was rambling on those first 3. 4th is bring your skills along. Don't ignore if you have had a career previously, or not even just career. Don't ignore the experiences that you've got. Bring them along with you, whether that's a career experience, whether that's a traveling experience, whether that's a life experience. Bring them along, because they add strings to your bow that are really important for you to kind of cut through in this industry. And ultimately what people buy into, if you're thinking about clients of ours, they're buying into you as a person. So it's really important to bring those experiences that you've got in your life along with you, because it'll help people buy into you as a person. And then the 5th one for me is, we talked about it a bit previously, but 100% set goals and milestones when you come into this, because if you don't set those goals and those milestones, the tricky times, and we talked about that roller coaster that real estate or any career changes, that those roller coaster drops will be bloody scary if you don't have those goals in mind and those milestones. And I think what those milestones especially do is it gets you through those tough days, tough weeks, and keeps you focused on, for me, that the first one was 6 months, now it's 12 months. It'll keep going through COVID right now. I know my milestone before COVID was 12 months, at which point I review what I've achieved and I make my next plan and my next decisions. If I didn't have that milestone in place, it'd be very easy to look at COVID and go, well, this is rubbish. Let's go back to marketing. If there's any jobs available. My daughter agrees as well.
I can hear that. So, well, that's a good tangent actually, because I did want to ask you about what your future goals were, and things that you're planning to implement that maybe you haven't done so already, or things that you've seen from other agents that you think, okay, that's good, I want to start doing that myself. What are the things that come to your mind when you think of that?
So I think the near-term thing is I've just moved areas. So I was working in Dubai Hills Estate when I first started. And as you know, Lloyd, I'm now working in Arabian Ranches with yourself and a few others in the luxury property team. So for me, the first thing in terms of future is really getting to know Arabian Ranches, building up my reputation, my presence in Arabian Ranches through relationships with owners, and ultimately getting listings, which is something that we as real estate agents obviously live and die by. So that's kind of the near-term focus, is just really getting to grips with that new area. I think the other thing is really positioning myself as a luxury property advisor. And I think the likes of yourself, Lloyd, Liam is probably a benchmark example of somebody that's really positioned, and Andrew as well, of people that have positioned themselves as trusted advisors in the niche that we operate in terms of the higher end type of property. And I think the way that I want to deliver that, and the thing that I'm going to focus on kind of going forwards, and actually taking a lot of the lessons from you and the I guess guidance from you on content. Content is something that I did a lot in my previous marketing career. I haven't done as much as I wanted to do in my career in real estate so far, but I see the value of it. I see how important it is. And yeah, getting content out there that has helped me position myself as a luxury property advisor is really going to help things. And then I think the other one is, and slightly different one, I guess, but having managed teams previously, I really see the value of having people that are better at certain things than you are, because there's no doubt about it, I'm rubbish at certain things. So what I really want to do is build out my personal team. So whether that's somebody that helps me out with my social media campaigns from a resource perspective, whether that's somebody that can support in my administration. So yeah, for me, it's about how do I add resource into my mini brokerage within the wider brokerage that ultimately helps me achieve what I want to achieve and helps the company along the way as well.
I think those are two great points and something to work on, and that's something even we're doing right now in terms of the content part of things. It's interesting that you mentioned like Liam, myself, and Andrew, because we're the ones who are doing more, I guess, of the social media stuff and YouTube, and definitely I'd suggest doing more of that. And they've also been on this podcast previous to you as well. So yeah, start doing more of that. I'm also doing it at the moment. We won't mention the C word, but there's a bit more time and ability to connect with people doing that at the moment. So I think it's a great time to start doing it. In terms of what you're saying about building a team, 100%. And that's, you were mentioning about stuff that surprised you earlier. And definitely the teamwork aspect is, most people have certain skills that they're good at, but it seems that a lot of real estate agents, you're trying to do everything at one. You're trying to be the admin guy, you're trying to be good at sales, you're trying to be good at social media, for example. And not everyone has those skill sets. You can develop them, but it's difficult, firstly, to get all those skill sets in a quick time period, and secondly, to have the time to do all of them simultaneously as well. So it's definitely a great idea to start building that team, and over time you can have your own kind of mini brokerage within a brokerage, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. And I think yes, there's a cost implication for that, but I guess my mindset is that that's going to pay off. And if it doesn't, then I guess, using a startup phraseology, pivot and change it up a bit. And yeah, if it's not working and it's not giving you the results that you were hoping for by having that team, then stop doing it. And I think that's the important thing. Is with technology now, there's so many different ways in which you can do it. You don't need to hire somebody full time to be able to support you on social media. You can go onto the likes of Fiverr as a website and Upwork, and you can get remote resource that are specialists in their thing. They've got track records, they've got reviews from hundreds of other clients that they've worked with, and you'll be surprised at how affordable some of those things are, and how easy it is to implement it. And like I said, if it's not working, then fine, just you've not hired somebody full time that you're sponsoring via Visa and all that kind of stuff. So you can stop that at the relevant points if need be, if you're not seeing any value from it.
Definitely. And yeah, I think other brokers should also look into it, because it will help them really scale their business. Okay, Ryan, I have nothing else to ask from you today, but if you can share with the listeners, the viewers, your social media handles so they can follow you on your accounts, and feel free to start them out now.
Great. So I think the one at the moment to focus on is my Instagram. So it's at that Lux Property Guy. So at that Lux Property Guy. And if I get more followers, I'm more likely to do more content. So hold me accountable for that. Any listeners and yourself, Lloyd. Interestingly, I was in conversation with Daniel Daggers yesterday on Instagram, on my personal Instagram account. And I said to him, by the way, so Daniel Daggers, for listeners that don't know, he's a luxury real estate agent in London, relatively big on Instagram. So I was randomly having a conversation with him, which I thought was really good, that he was clearly engaging in all of the comments and the likes and the posts that he had on his content, which is so important, no matter what level you get to. So I had a bit of a few-minute conversation with him on Instagram, and I said to him, would you mind following my real estate handle? And I gave him the handle. He clearly had a look at it, and he came back to me and said, when you get to 400 posts, and I think I'm on about 85 right now, when you get to 400 posts, I'll follow you. Which is really good, because it's holding me accountable for doing more. Not just because I want Daniel Daggers to be following me, because does that add much value? Not sure. But actually, some people holding you accountable to things really helps you push to get where you want to go.
Definitely. And for anyone starting anything, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to build up that channel. So go follow Ryan on his Instagram so he can start posting more and get to those 400 posts. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And please tune in to the next podcast when it comes along. Thank you.